and we've been very pleased with them over time. So on January 27th, all households were sent these items: an introduction letter, and that was on the USD 306 letterhead, a printed questionnaire, and a business reply postage paid return envelope that would come directly back to the Docking Institute. As of February 29th, when we ended data collection, we had received 333 paper questionnaires and 27 online responses. And this resulted in an overall 24% response rate, again, which is a pretty strong response rate these days. So I think what Mike and I thought, well, let's just give you some key findings right up front, and then we'll walk through some graphs. To the extent that you want to stop and ask questions, we'll do that. When we look at this study, we think, well, what are some really key takeaways given your overall information objectives? And we find that among all the respondents, this is everyone in the district, not just those with kids or prospective future parents, 61% rate USD 306 in providing early childhood education or preschool for the district, at least at a very important level, and some rate it extremely important. Among all respondents, in allowing more than one site to be selected, 40% of all the responses selected USD 306 campus as a good location. So what we did with that item was basically say, hey, here are some particular locations that we have in mind. You're allowed to select all that apply. And so some respondents selected more than one. So essentially this became almost like an open voting kind of a set of response options. So that's one way to think about it. But basically, at the bottom line, 40% of all votes cast essentially were targeting USD 306 as a good location, followed by Assyria with 31%. Among all parents with preschool-age children and prospective future parents, when they were asked how likely they would be to enroll their children in a USD 306 provided half-day preschool if one were available, about half say it is extremely likely that they would enroll their child, and another almost 33% combined say it is very likely or somewhat likely. So that's showing a really high level of interest among parents with preschool-age children and prospective future parents. Among parents with preschool-age children and, again, prospective future parents, when they were presented with this lead-in, if your children were to attend a USD 306 half-day preschool program, would you need? And then 24% indicated they would need child care services for the remainder of the workday. Another 28% said maybe. So again, a lot of uncertainty there, but there are a potential additional percentage that would use the facility for or would use child care services if it was provided for the remainder of the day. Among parents with preschool-age children and the prospective future parents, again, when presented with another lead-in, if your children were to attend a USD 306 half-day preschool program, would you need? About 27%, so about a little over a quarter, say they would need transportation services to the USD 306 half-day preschool. And another 31% or so say maybe. So again, a fair percentage would be that 30% may go ahead and actually use them if such services were provided. So those are kind of top line or key findings that we see from the study. I mean, at the end of the day, it seems like you wanted to use these data to make decisions about the level of interest, the level of support from the community, which are the first couple items, and then among those who are truly, with kids who are in that target age or prospective future parents, how many would potentially use the service? So let me stop at that point and see if there are any questions. And I will tell you, just to remind you, we have most of the graphs in the report we're going to walk through here in a minute. But are there any questions right now about key level or key findings, top level type findings?
Yes, I do have a couple. When you were talking about the best location, this is Dwight, by the way. You cite 40%, say the school. My question is then can we, since you're going to use that, Assyria and Gypsum are two separate locations. Would it be reasonable to say that the over 30% that said Assyria and the 22% that said Gypsum means that 53% or 52 say they like it not at the school?
Mike, do you want to feel free to jump in if you want to on that one? My initial response would be because it's a select all that apply. Because if they selected Assyria or Gypsum, it doesn't mean they don't think that USD 306 isn't a good location.
Well, I agree, but wouldn't you think that if the Gypsum residents wanted it at Gypsum and the Assyria wanted it at Assyria, they'd probably pick their community first?
That's pretty logical, yeah.
And so that's 60%, and then it says 30% don't want us to offer it at all. So I'm trying to gauge how I read the 40% because I'm kind of reading that I'm just trying to read through this, and I guess I don't. It's just the
most popular choice.
Are they all three?
It's got the most responses.
Hold on, Lori. If Gypsum residents in Assyria, I think you have to add those two together to get this. We can't
do that because we don't know who voted for them. I could have voted for all three of them.
That's right. And
so
Gypsum and under your logic, no, wait a minute. Under your logic, then the 306 campus could be third choice for every respondent, and Gypsum and Assyria first.
But that's not what we asked.
I'm just saying, as we read the data, I'm trying to read it.
It could be, but that's not what we asked. That's not what the data is telling us.
That's fine. Let's move on.
So I actually went ahead. I don't know if you could.
It's important to clarify that we had 473 responses, but of that, we had 360 participants.
No, I understand that. And I agree with where you're going, Lori. I'm going back to it and you're saying, okay, they say they all wanted it at the school. I don't think you can say that because if I were picking, I would say Gypsum first, then I might say school second. If I were in Assyria, I wouldn't say Gypsum second. I would say Assyria or the school. So I'm saying that it looks to me that 53% wanted in their home community. I can't hear, but that's okay.
I just said that could be, but that's not what we asked.
Well, but it's important to know if the data is really telling us what we want or telling us what we don't want to hear but see.
Lori, I don't know if you all passed along some questions on this very issue. Mm-hmm. And Mike and I did some additional analyses and provided an updated version of the technical report on page 7. That new narrative that kind of breaks that out a little bit more, kind of along the lines of Dwight's question, is in that page 7 now.
Right. And that was emailed out to us in our weekly update, I believe, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So if someone looked at the earlier version, though, and was kind of reading it, they wouldn't have seen that. And I just wanted to point that out that we did update that. So you might want to look at it even, again. Yeah.
That might answer some questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else before we kind of walk through graphs? And I'll move pretty quickly. Okay, so as a lead into the questionnaire, we needed to provide a little bit of information so that people had kind of a similar context in mind as they answered the questions. So this was an important lead-in. Students who are behind in entering kindergarten often struggle throughout school and may never catch up to their peers. Early childhood education helps prepare children for kindergarten. Preschool is one form of early childhood education. The state of Kansas currently funds half-day preschool for at-risk students. There is currently a privately run preschool in this area, and USD 306 operates a Parents as Teachers program. So we need to provide that, especially to the general public who may have very little awareness of what is happening on the ground. Mm-hmm. And so this first figure here, figure 4, is the importance of USD 306 providing the early childhood education preschool. And again, this is among all respondents. So this basically reiterates the very first key finding that we presented above, where you have 32% saying it's extremely important and another almost 30% saying very important. You total these two slices together and you're at that 61% we mentioned in the key findings. And then we turn to importance of the district providing fee-based childcare after preschool day ends. Again, this is among all respondents. About 18% said extremely important. Another 30% said very important. And we've probably covered this enough for now, but this is the graph that we were just talking about moments ago. And again, we added some narrative, which would appear on your page 7 of the report you should have. Okay, now we'll switch to findings among those who have preschool-age children and are potentially prospective parents, and we'll focus on preschool first.
Do you have the number of those? Is that the 68?
Yes, let me just flip to a graph real quick because I put it in there. Yeah, there it is, the 68, Lori. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll go to the first graph. We asked them whether their preschool-age child attends preschool. So these are the 68 in the sample or in the set of respondents who indicated they do have a child in that age group now, and 43% have a child attending preschool. We asked for the location of that preschool, and this chart just shows you the actual counts of how people answered. By far and away, the majority have their child in a preschool in Salina. 20 out of the 29 who reported there. We asked about the structure of that preschool with regard to whether it's half or full day and the number of days per week used. And, the half day column kind of jumps out off the page there at you. You see that most have a half day arrangement of some sort, with 3 days a week being the most common by far on the half day arrangements. When it came to full day, there were 0 who had a child in a full day, 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days a week, but there were 6 who had a child in preschool for 5 days a week. We asked them to give reasons, those who say the children do not attend preschool. We asked for reasons why. And you can see again right away, this one bar kind of jumps off the page. It's easy to see that it's primarily because children are not old enough yet. We asked about the likelihood of enrolling their children in a USD 306 half-day preschool. And here is where we got one of those top line or those key finding numbers. 51% says it's extremely likely that they would. And another 15% say very likely. Only 16% say not at all likely. And then again, among the same set of parents, but actually including now the prospective, we'll get to that in a minute, but these are the same set of parents that we dealt with earlier when we were asking the preschool questions. Now we're going to turn to childcare and daycare questions. So we asked whether their preschool-age child attends childcare or daycare, and about 42% say yes. We asked them then a parallel question, as we did with regard to preschool. Children were to attend USD 306 half-day preschool. Would they need childcare services for the remainder of the workday? And, you can see that only about 24% say yes with certainty, but then there's another 28% that say maybe. We asked about the location of a child care, daycare, facility where their children are now. Let me back up. I need to double check that one. Hey, Mike, do you have that page in the report handy?
On page 13.
Thank you. Yeah, this was a follow-up question to the whole 30, who indicated they do have a child or children in child care daycare. Okay, but so yeah, and again, Salina kind of jumps off the chart there.
Mm-hmm.
If children were to attend a USD 306 half-day preschool, would transportation be needed? About 27% say yes, and then another pretty substantial percentage, 31%, say maybe. We did ask a question about the kind of trying to get a sense for a price tolerance. We asked a set of items that said, okay, would they be comfortable with this range? Would they be willing to pay this range? And then those ranges, are right there in front of you on that chart. So this chart, we'll start with the lowest range. About 30% say that they would, maybe it makes more sense to start with the highest range. At least 7% say they would pay at least $150, but less than $250 per week. In the green slice shows the percentage, about 20%, who said they would pay at least $100, but less than $150 per week. And you can see a really large slice, relatively large slice here, 44% would pay at least $50, but less than $100 per week. This is a price that many probably understand, even from market conditions, that they're looking at themselves to be a very reasonable price for the area, at least. And then another 30% say they would pay at least 10, but less than 50. And so that's it. Those are our main findings. If you've read the entire report, there's a few more graphs in there, but I think they're less. I think they're a little more tertiary to the graphs that we've looked at this evening. So again, open for any questions. Mm-hmm.
I did have one more, and I apologize.
Yep. Nope.
Sure.
No need to apologize.
I'm asking Brett. Of the preschool age children that attend preschool, figure 7 gives us 68 kids, and I'm a little bit confused. It says 42% go and 57 don't. Now, am I to understand that the top reason for them not attending back down in figure 8 is that they're not old enough? So if we provided preschool, we wouldn't increase that number, would we? Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. If they're considering their children not old enough yet, then yeah, I don't think you're going to necessarily pick up any of those folks. And we didn't ask age of child on here, so that would have been a really, that would have been a further ground truthing to actually have asked that question. But these are probably folks, with kids in that toddler age range or younger infant.
Well, I mean, because my count, 29 and 39 are 68, correct? So if they thought they were too young, then we're actually, everybody in the district of that age kid has a place to go to preschool. Is that the way I understand that?
That completed the survey.
So there's no one right now that's not attending a preschool
That completed this.
Survey? Okay, so I mean, but Brett, do I understand that correctly?
Well, the figure 9 is the one that includes reasons that their child doesn't attend.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to dig down a little bit with them.
Okay.
And of course, you see the majority there, 28. That again, the bar that jumps off the chart is that 28 who say that their child isn't old enough yet. But there was, there were 2 who said not available, family can't afford. And please keep in mind here that while we got a good response rate on this, we're only dealing with 24% of your overall population.
But 15 would be our population in this survey.
Yeah,
that we could possibly serve.
Yeah, and what you'd want to know is you try to it's going to be a guesstimate, but you could extrapolate from this sample to the known number of families with child age kids, which will only be an estimate. That's why I said the best you can do is guess.
Sure.
And we don't know, we don't know whether the response rate among young couples is 24% or whether it might actually be more like 30%. And whereas the rest of the population, it may only be down around 15 or 20%. See?
Okay. And I have one last question. So in a district that has an on-campus preschool, what is their percentage of the preschool age kids that they are servicing? Do we know that number? Is there an average that do we have that?
I don't have that. Maybe I hope someone on your team over there can reach out to someone and collect those data, but we don't have that.
Okay.
I can try and ask, but that's going to be a very difficult question because then you're talking about comparing population with enrollment, and I'm not sure that necessarily is being studied.
Well, they'd be able to count how many kids are in their district that age and how many are going to preschool.
We can get an estimate, but it's been really hard. I mean, that's one of the struggles we have with parents as teachers is that sometimes we don't know how many kids that are eligible for that program live within our district. We really do kind of beat the bushes to try and get some of those names on who's where and whether or not.
Okay.
I did want to comment, Dwight.
Sure.
67 minus 28 is 39, not 29.
Yeah, I know. And I'm sorry, I corrected that. Yeah, you're right.
29 out of 39 according to this. And then it gives on that chart reasons why some are not. And you can see some of the reasons that they give for those 10-ish that are not accounted for in the preschool numbers. And then, of course, the other numbers that are not old enough, those would be considered future preschoolers. So that would be our possible enrollment down the line.
Right. I was just pointing out, I mean, at first broach, it looks like there's 39 that are unserviced, and that's really this year, and that's really not accurate. It should be more like 11, which is significant. I'm not arguing that.
Are there other questions? See if I can see everybody again. No other questions while we have our researchers on the call? Okay, just to update the rest of the board, the Early Education Committee met a week ago to review this information also. And we asked for some additional information from Cassie and her team. They have some data based upon this year's kindergarten class and where they came in preparedness-wise and what we knew about their enrollment in preschool last year. And so the next time we get together, that's the information that we're going to look at to try to discern in combination with the survey results what Southeast of Saline's needs are. If you guys have feedback that you want me to share back to that committee, and if you want Jill to share back to that committee, we'd be happy to do that.
And Roger, Lori, we will email you this PowerPoint show in case that task force wants to have it too.
Great.
Thank you.
That'd be wonderful.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Okay.
Bet. Have a good meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Before you get off, you'll have to give Roger the power back.
Okay, here we go.
Hello, Joe.
Okay, let's see if that worked. And I'm going to also stop my screen share. Or maybe you are right now, Roger. Okay, do you have the power back?
Okay. Side by side, hide video.
Okay, my notice says that you are controlling my screen.
That's interesting. I'm going to give you control of your screen back if you could make me the host again.
Oh, right.
That's an
Well, that
interesting feature. You gave me
like
remote control access to your computer.
Okay, we'll just stop the screen.
There we go.
And then you'll have to kind of guide me to that where I turn the host back over.
I think it's back under more.
Was under it. Okay.
If you go to my square, there's 3 little dots that will pop up, and I believe you can make me the host.
I'm not seeing the my square.
I'm not either.
Under my
Oh,
picture,
Roger's square.
Under your square. Okay.
hover over my face, you should see 3 little dots in my Brady Bunch square.
Okay, here we go.
You see 3 little dots. One of them
Yep.
should say make host.
Okay, let me just, you actually, oh, that's funny. Your Brady Bunch square shifted on me just as I was clicking host, and it almost made Charisse the host.
We'll do that.
Try this one more time. Here we go.
That's
Okay,
okay.
this will work.
There we go.
Host.
You're
Thank you.
saying that Roger is now the host.
Okay, boy, this was fun.
Thank you so much. We all learned something tonight. At least.
Okay,
Yeah, we did.
okay, take care.
All right.
All right.
Mr. Stump, did you have anything else from our meeting last week that you wanted to share with the rest of the board?
No, I think there was some discussions, but I think we're going to need to meet again to move forward from that. And Cassie was getting some information, I think, that will help that discussion. It's difficult sometimes, as you can tell, with these types of meetings. We met remotely and had some technical difficulty.
Were all of you able to see those additional footnotes that the Docking Institute provided us after last month's meeting? Yes. Okay, great.
I would like to point out one thing on there on the bottom of the additional notes, I think it's the last table that they gave. This table shows the numbers and percentages of respondents that select only one option, and 99 chose as the sole option on campus. 40 chose Asaria as the sole option. Only 13 chose gypsum as the only option that they gave. So when those that only chose one option, the numbers were actually a little more dramatic than the ones that chose multiple options, and it started to get a little more muddled in that case. But it is broken down by who chose one, who chose more than one, and what their options were. So I thought that was good information to have when they went back and disaggregated that.
Okay, and if you think of anything again, are we planning to meet before the end of May, or it'll be before next board meeting?
Before next board meeting for sure.
Okay, so just let me know if there are additional thoughts you want me to convey to or Jill, either one of us, to the committee. Okay, we will keep moving on to agenda item number 4.2, which is driver's education.
Driver's education has been an ongoing discussion for obvious reasons. In-person class normally would start very soon because in-person classes would start sometimes before school even let out or the week following so that we could get that done. And we're obviously not in a position to do that. If you follow the governor's guidelines, we should be able to start in June, as of June 15th, without any restrictions as far as group sizes to do in-person classwork, coursework for the driver's ed. And even at that, we were looking at the very real possibility of putting them in the theater with every other row and 2 seats empty in between and making sure that we're following some sort of spacing and guidelines during that time period. It may be a little bit optimistic to say that we could jump in with the 15th, but also part of this will depend on how many people we get enrolled. Because actually the guidelines as of June 1st is going to be groups of 90 or fewer, and we never have 90 people take it. So even if we're still stuck in phase 3 and we don't get the all clear, we would still have enough clearance to sustain the groups that we normally get, which are somewhere typically in the 40s, who would take driver's ed through us. I've talked with Wade. This is actually his schedule, and so therefore I am recommending, with the potential to adjust or shift as circumstances allow, that we go ahead and approve driver's ed for this summer with the schedule that Wade has come up with.
Does anyone have questions for Mr. Stumpf? Jimmy?
Out of those 40, sorry, messed my computer up. Out of those 40, how many are in-district kids and how many are out-of-district kids?
I think they were all last year in district, weren't they?
In my 5 years here, we've had, well, no, I don't want to say that. I'm sorry. In my 5 years here, we've had one student who wasn't a USD 306 student, but we have not tracked who was in versus out of district. We have tracked whether they're enrolled with us or not.
Right. That's what I should have asked, was if they go to school or not a 306.
Yeah, I think in the 5 years that I've been here, we've only had one student who wasn't a 306, and it was somebody I think that was visiting, spent the summer with grandma or something.
Okay. The only reason I ask is if we get close to those numbers and we could just take care of 306, yeah. And then, but if it's all, that's great if we have that many going out.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I move we accept the recommendations on driver's ed. This is Dwight.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Jimmy, second.
Thank you. And Steve, before you got on, we all agreed that we would just do a non-consent vote by voice vote. Otherwise, we're not going to do roll call tonight. Okay. So are there any dissenting votes or any additional discussion first, I guess? The motion is that we would offer summer's driver education as long as we are in phase 3. Is that right? Phase 3 is the number we're looking for? Okay. And that Wade Castleman would be the instructor, compensating for teaching that at $200 per completing student. Any discussion? Any dissenting votes? Hearing and seeing none, motion passes 7-0. Okay, the next item on the agenda are school fees. And those were provided in our packet. So there's an increase of our kindergarten snack fee from $20 to $25. School lunches going up 10 cents. And milk going up a nickel. And then we also needed to establish breakfast fees, which those were included. So looks like $1.60. That would all be new since we've not done breakfast before. Does anybody have questions?
Everything else is all the same, Lori?
Everything else is the same, yes.
Okay.
We looked at this, if I remember right, more thoroughly last year, did we not? And did we take something out last year? Does anybody remember?
We took several things off last year, yes. I think
We reduced some of the textbook fees, technology fees,
Yeah.
and we removed the activity fee for those who are participating in activities.
Yeah.
And
we had a pay to play.
How do you guys feel about the activity bus? I know $30, I'm curious, Mr. Stump, if you know how much revenue that accounts for, and given what, I assume these all just go into general fund. That's my first question, I guess. Does all these go into the general fund, and then, or does the activity bus actually go into the transportation line item?
That is a great question. I am pretty sure that the activity bus would go into the transportation. Textbook goes into textbook. It doesn't just go into general use, general fund. The technology fee would go that direction, and we've changed what some of our plans are for what we do with that. The gym locker is collected but then given back if they return the lock at the end of the year. So we try to be very specific about this. The band rental fee even goes into an activity line for band to use. That is one way that we fund instrument repairs.
I guess I'd be interested in having a conversation about getting rid of the activity bus $30 fee, given this in the transportation budget.
I think that was added in 9 or 10. We were in the middle of a lot of crazy. So
How much money are we talking about that generates?
It does not generate a lot of money. It also doesn't come close to covering our costs for those activity fees. But I don't have the numbers in front of me for how much we actually raise. Again, there's $30 for unlimited rides after school. When I'm writing that check, I consider it a bargain. It's pretty cheap.
And I tend to agree with you, but Justin, are you angling towards you think there would be some kids that don't participate in activities because of that fee?
No, I don't believe so. I'm just looking at opportunities to reduce school fees when our families enroll at Southeast. And I know that our transportation budget, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Stump, what I've been reading from you is our transportation budget, we're not utilizing enough of it from the state, and we're at risk of having to send some of those dollars back. So apparently we're doing okay on our transportation budget. So to me, that's a fee that we could look at giving some relief to our families for.
The state actually disaggregates between activity transportation and student transportation for routes. So when we're audited, we have to break out what is activity and what is route, school to and from school. So again, we're in two different pools of money, and that gets kind of difficult to track all the time. You have a number?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We raised last year $2,700.
Pennies.
You know, my guess is the $30 to a certain family will be a lot, to Justin's point, at that given time. And if it's only $2,700, it almost doesn't seem really worth it.
I would agree.
I'll move to remove the activity bus fee from our 2021 school year fees.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I second, Dwight.
Thank you, Dwight. Is there any more discussion on the fee schedule? I guess I have a question about breakfast because we haven't really heard what that's going to look like. If it's going to be a grab and go breakfast, if it's a hot breakfast, is this intended to cover our costs with breakfast, or is it a supplement?
Similar to lunch, there is a federal supplement that comes for every qualified meal that we serve. So the federal government will pay us a certain amount. We will charge a certain amount, and between the two, it should be self-sufficient. It isn't necessarily self-sufficient, but we try. And then they come back and they tell us whether or not that we need to increase our contribution based on how close we are to that mark. So these numbers are a little bit of shot in the dark. We went through the different breakfast programs throughout our league and throughout the state and looked at some averages and just kind of landed somewhere reasonably in the middle and came up with a recommendation. And so after a year, we'll probably come back to you and hopefully have a better idea of how that all balanced out. But your question about grab and go versus hot, there may be a mixture of both, depending on what grade level you are and depending on how well we're able to sustain the different things that we're going to be able to do. One of our challenges with breakfast, we are not able to do shifts like we do at lunch, and we just don't have the seating capacity and the line capacity to handle 700 students in 15 minutes walk through without getting kids late for school. So that's been one of our big concerns as we're trying to design this program. And we've gone through several different options, which include the elementary being served in the classroom and eating in the classroom during those first few minutes of school while they're doing some of their social, emotional, and family building activities that they'd be able to eat during those times. So those are some of the things that we've been considering and discussing with the admin and with Jill, with Kim. And so we will bring a formal description of what our recommendation will be. But all this COVID stuff has put us behind on that as well from where we thought we would be.
Okay. There are other questions?
The breakfast is 100% optional, correct?
Yes. Lunch is too, if it gets right down to. What do you mean by optional? For the kid?
Yes.
Yeah, and technically lunch is too, but we have a very high percentage of our students that do eat lunch with us. Actually, if you compared to the rest of the state, our numbers percentage-wise are tops. We are very much, and part of that is our location, but we also have good lunches, and people don't like to skip our lunches. Breakfast will likely start slow just because it's new and people aren't sure what to expect. And I would expect it will grow as they start seeing people next to them eating and decide that they want to participate. So it would not surprise me to see it easily double after the from the first week to the 9th week.
And the way our lunch card works, that money's just going to go to their account, right?
Right. They'll
So
have one
here's
account.
your $50. They can eat whatever they want for $50.
Jill was asking about, the lunch cards and the family accounts. What we have right now is a family account. So if you put $50 in an account and you've got 3 kids in the building, you don't have to designate, I want 15 to this kid, 10 to this kid, 10 to that kid. It goes into an account and it will draft it across the board. And breakfast will be the same way. And parents will have to recognize whether or not they want their children to eat and make sure that they're communicating with their children. I had that discussion with my own. We had breakfast options at home, and they were told that they were not to be eating breakfast at school. And I was at school, so I was able to catch them multiple times when they were eating breakfast at school. So there was a couple of times in which they reimbursed me for having eaten breakfast at school because that was not on the menu. But again, they will see their classmates eating and they will decide, hey, this is pretty good, and you'll start seeing that grow. The same thing goes for seconds. You have a hungry teenage boy in that high school and they start getting a second sandwich and the add-ons that are available, that adds up pretty quickly. Your $2 or $3.15 meal can easily cost you $6 by the time you walk through that line and you get a second sandwich and a couple of drinks or something off of the a la carte list. So parents will have to understand that and have that conversation on what's allowed.
Is it possible to get our accounts? I know on PowerSchool there's a place for accounts, and one of the troubles that I have, like a lot of folks, is I'm told after they've run out of money 2 weeks ago that I owe money to the school, and half of what I give them is basically makeup. Is there a reason we don't keep that available so that parents, as they check PowerSchool, can see where their account is?
That is a great question. Our system, which we've had in place for a long, long time, has not been compatible and has not allowed for those programs to talk to each other. And we've currently signed a contract to drop our old program and pick up a new program our old program really wasn't set up to do breakfast either. We've had it for a long time. The new program will allow us to do the a la carte and breakfast easier, and it will communicate with PowerSchool. So the new program will dump into PowerSchool. All of your fees and balances will populate in PowerSchool. And we are also looking at that same program. While we're doing that, will allow us to pay by credit card. And that will also tie into, we're bringing on a PowerSchool edition that will allow us to do online enrollment. We're planning on having all of that ready for August.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? If not, we have a motion on the table to remove the activity bus fee and accept all other changes as recommended. Are there any dissenting votes? Hearing none, motion carries 7-0. All right. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is 4.4, and this is a discussion about our local option budget.
Last year, we set our local option budget about this time, and because of that, I put that on here as potentially a discussion item or an action item if you so choose. And I gave you some background information on trends and comparisons. And so there's several different ways that we can go there. And ultimately, it'll be up to you on how you want to set that amount, and then we will budget around it.
I need some help interpreting. You have 3 lines there that tell me current, but none of the numbers are the same. So can you explain that to us?
Okay, so the top line on current, this is what we have for this current school year. We are collecting 28.6% on LOB. That's 28.6% of our general
fund
is the level we chose to go with for our local. We authorized 30% by statute. We chose to take less than that, and the percent ended up being 28.6%. The dollar amount, the 28.6%, there should be a dollar sign in front of the next number, equated to $1.6 million and 16 mils. That's what those 3 numbers across. That's what we have this year in our budget. So there are several different options there. If we choose to maintain our current percentage, because next year we're anticipating our general fund going up, same percentage of a larger amount would collect more dollars. If we chose to keep the same number of dollars, and I basically rounded that, the percentage would drop because, again, the same number of dollars would be a smaller percentage of the larger budget that will be our next year's budget. And those are just some samples there, and you can go in whichever direction you want to go from there.
I was reading current, and I'm like, those 3 things cannot all mean the same thing. So I appreciate that.
But they do in our complicated world of school.
Well, yeah, I was just missing a descriptor in front of the word current. It was a question mark. Do we maintain the percent or do we maintain the dollar is what was presented, or something else? So that's helpful. Thank you. Okay. Did anybody else have other questions when looking at the information?
Mr. Stump, on the data that you gave us on the rate comparison file, LOB rate comparison charts, going back to 2010.
Yes.
That chart down there, can you walk me through that current last year increase, and then looking at that? I assume this is your estimate on a low increase of valuation and an average increase of valuation.
Yes.
Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Okay. So again, that top line is more where we're at currently. Our current valuation within the district is about 77 million. Last year, our increase was $840,000 in property value. That was basically half of what our average has been for the last 15 years. Our average was an increase, a yearly increase of 1.6 million in property valuation. And for some reason last year it was half of that. So I went and gave 2 different scenarios. One is if we have an increase similar to last year, considering that low, because that's the lowest increase we've had in 5 years. So I used that number, basically 850,000, added it to our property value, and then recalculated what our mills might be depending on different levels of potential LOB. Again, if we chose 30%, which is what we're by statute allowed, if we chose 28.5%, or if we chose 27.7%, and what that might look like. All of these numbers, because we will not get valuation until June, all these numbers are speculative. The bottom one on the average increase is I used the 1.6. That was our 10 or 15 year average. I use that number, saying if we return to an average jump of what we normally do. And again, that would lower the number of mills it would take to raise the same number of dollars. And again, it doesn't give property relief to an owner if your value goes up at the same time your mills come down, you end up paying about the same. But valuation within the district is not necessarily a static thing. There's houses being built in the district, and those valuations account for a good chunk of that increase on any given year. And so those would be new taxpayers or additional taxes that'll be put up a shed. I'll be paying a little bit more. That's how it works.
And so to make sure that I understand it correctly, the valuation will not impact the LOB dollars that we come in. The only thing the valuation will impact is the mill rate that ends up being at.
Correct. Correct. Valuation is up to us. It is a percentage of the general fund, and our general fund is pretty much locked in for next year. So we can have a good idea what that number would be. So we're taking a percentage of next year's general, and next year's general has been estimated based on this year's enrollment.
And what is next year's general increase? Your estimate, your pretty close estimate you said that you had there. How much is the general fund increasing over this current school year based on our enrollment projection?
The general fund is scheduled to increase by approximately $174,000 based on state aid.
Okay.
And that number is what?
About $172,000.
No, the total, not just the increase.
The total?
Mm-hmm. It's just under 6 million, right?
Yes.
Total with the LOB?
Yes. And I've got, I want to say I've got that in.
Oh, that's actually just general fund. Okay. So this year's is 5.8. And then the supplemental is 1.663.
Yes.
So combined, we were looking at just under or just over 7 million. So we're looking at next year just under, you said it's 172?
Yeah, it's 172 or 174. I've got that number
Okay.
for you later in the meeting.
So we'll be just almost right at 6 million for general fund next year.
Lori, is it again important to point out that when we look at this LOB number, when we were struggling back in 14-15, the increase there is around 250-300,000, and we maxed that out, and we said if the state starts putting in more money, we would back that back off. We didn't say we would maintain it at a level. We said we would reduce it back down. And so although adjusting the mill levy makes us feel okay, we still are collecting the same amount of dollars, and we're not really doing what we said we were going to, which was to drop that back down if the state picked up their end of the slack, and they have done that.
Yeah.
And Dwight, that all depends on what your perspective is on what it is that you're collecting, because our dollar amount last year at 1.66 was the lowest dollar amount that we had collected since 14-15, when the year that you indicated. And our mill levy at 15.9 is the lowest mill levy that we have had in a decade, in the entire 10 years that is represented on that chart. So we are much lower. I mean, in 10-11, we were at 16.7. We're almost a full mill below that in our collection. And our highest point of collection was in 14-15, and we're 60,000 below that in real dollars collected. Even though inflation is going up, we are collecting 60,000 actual dollars less than what we had maxed out at, and nearly a full mill less than what our max was. Well, not even our max. We're 4 mills below what our max was when we were collecting. Was 16, 15, 16 when our max mill for that.
Correct. The mill levy is just a factor. The dollars tell me that in 13-14 we collected 1.4 from the local taxpayer. Then we went to 1.7 to the local taxpayer, and we've gone back to 1.6, which tells me that we have increased 200,000 in local taxes since the last 5 years. I also know that our general fund dollars have also gone up because the state is kicking in more. So our general fund dollars, am I correct in saying that our general fund dollars have gone up every year?
They have gone up every year in the last several years.
The last 3 years.
Okay.
Last 3 years.
Okay. And, you know, I'm not saying we aren't using it prudently. I'm saying that we haven't given the tax relief that we said we would if the state kicked in more money, and they have.
So, am I right, Roger, that this year a mill equals about 106,000?
No, a mill equals about 79,000. Next year, depending on what our valuation is. This year it was about 770,000. No, sorry, 77,000. And that's based on that.
For LOB. Sorry, I'm talking for LOB only. Don't I just take the adopted divided by the mill rate?
You would hope it'd work out that nicely, but it isn't. And one of the reasons that it isn't is because there is some state aid. And another reason that it isn't is because we have essentially bought down our mill rate the last couple of years by carrying over a few dollars. And when we carry over dollars, we're basically buying down next year's mill rate. And so these are not one-to-one easy to calculate. And it was kind of chasing my tail as I'm trying to provide this to you, because we have had carryover money the last couple of years. And that carryover money artificially lowers that mill rate.
The carryover money, though, is going to fund accounts like special ed and our food and transportation, professional development, right? Those are legal places that we can carry over.
If we carry it over in accounts, rollover accounts, but the last couple of years we have carried over in LOB. If we carry over in the LOB account, it dollar for dollar reduces your next year's collection. And by doing that, it lowers.
That is something I just learned. I didn't know we could do that.
Well, it's essentially giving back taxpayer money.
Right.
If we don't spend general fund, we give it back to the state. If we don't spend local fund, we give it back to the local. In the last several years, we have not spent out the LOB, which basically buys down the next year's mill rate, which is one of the reasons why it's really, really difficult to calculate some of these, because it can be manipulated by how much money we choose to roll over and where the LOB is. And so we'll have this conversation all over again in August when we decide we decide what we want our mill rate to look like.
About how much was that this year, Rod?
A couple $100,000.
So
couple mil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we would not have done that, the mill rate would have been 17.
Close.
And looking at where we're at today, or as of the end of April, I guess, when we're looking at expenditures, we have $1 million still sitting in our LOB.
Yes, and some of that will end up fueling the transfers that we normally fuel. Again, we have transfers that will need to go into basically the same places we always put them: special ed, food services, some of those. And so we budget in a certain number of dollars at the end of the year, basically to jumpstart next year, because we have to operate until at least October before we get our first check from the state. So we have to have enough money to carry us that deep into next school year rolled over into those accounts. And we'll take that out of LOB.
Okay.
So if we shoot, Mr. Stump, if we shot for 27%, That would be obviously a little less than the dollar amount on there. Is that easy to calculate?
It is not easy to calculate. I wish it was. But again, that's a lot of that's based on the rollover that we've had previously.
But we could do an estimate based upon the figures that you gave us.
Sure. I mean, if you were to knock another 0.7 off of there, you're looking at, well, what's the difference there? That's 0.8. You're looking at the difference of $60,000.
So it'd be 1.6-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lori, I'll move we set our LOB percent at 27%.
Right, second.
Is there any more discussion?
I think, this is Steve, I think we're a little premature. I'm all for some tax relief, but I also believe that we have, in good faith, tried to manage our money and provide relief. I'm a worrywart. I know that I got my assessment from the county and my home went down for the second year in a row. So I'm not the only lucky guy. I'm aware of that. I think we're just jumping the gun to lower our income, regardless of where you get it. I think we have, in good faith, been watchful and provided some relief. And when you figure in the inflation over the last 5 to 10 years, I'm sure we've created relief. I think we're a little premature making that choice. That's my opinion.
How close are you guys getting to? I agree with. I don't have a problem waiting, Steve, but I want this decision made before we get into negotiations on the salary, on this pace, on compensation and negotiations. So how you guys are?
I have several comments to make in our negotiation part of tonight's meeting, because I have those concerns also. I don't want to do what we did last year and surprise everyone, because I truly believe that came back to bite us. So I agree.
So we're figuring that we should be able to save fairly closely at 27%. We'd be close to $1.6 million, which is just within $60,000 of where we were this current school year.
And again, it's a pretty wild estimate at this point. Part of that will depend on how much rollover money we have to put into there.
Would you rather set
that'll impact the mills, not necessarily the percent. So
would you rather me set a dollar amount, Mr. Stump?
You can go either way you want to. The dollar amount is I'd have to come back and tell you what that percent is. I will tell you that, it's all budget. So if this number is lower, then we'll just have to figure out what we can do without.
You'll have to withdraw your motion because it has been seconded, Justin.
I think the other thing we need to remember is we are looking at a budget shortfall in the state next year. And while we're on a schedule for reimbursement to have our general fund funded per student with our base state aid, we don't know what that'll look like post-COVID. And this is wave one. If there's another incident this fall, I don't know. I'm concerned about it as well. We're in a good place now, but I do have a question. Did the state ever pass anything to limit how much we can carry over in our contingency fund?
No.
Okay. So we're sitting at about 10% right now, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I did include in our last details that there's only about 15 districts in the state that are at our level or lower for percentage.
So are you guys at a point before our June meeting to be talking? And to me, these issues are somewhat related on the schedule and the timing. So are you guys at a point in the before our June board meeting to be talking about salary negotiations so we can have this figured out before?
No, what have you heard from the association?
We haven't had any conversations on schedule, but I would hope to get started. School's out. I would hope to get started at least with some initial meetings between now and our June meeting. Again, it's hard to get started until we get our insurance, and we don't expect our insurance until 1st of June. It's hard to get started or know what some of these details are until we get our valuation. We won't get our valuation until late June, probably mid-June. So there's some pretty big, our property value, our property insurance. I've got a meeting at the end of May, which will get our numbers for that. Our special ed assessments for next year, I've got a meeting later this week, and we'll get some estimates on what that'll look like. There's some big budgetary things that are still out there that at this point, I've just been guessing, using, average increases and things like that to kind of get a ballpark figure of where we're at and how far that $172,000 of new money will go. And therefore, again, if you look at that, there's some pretty big unknowns.
Kelsey, what's my motion on the floor state?
I believe it was 27%.
27%.
I'd like to change that to 27.5. So we're right close to where your dollar amount currently is.
I will second that again.
Okay, so he rescinded the first motion and then restated a motion at 27.5%. And Dwight seconded that motion. Is there any discussion on that?
On the special education, we're going to have more expenses with that this year.
Every year.
But are we having more in-house this year?
Some of it is based on census. Jill's asking about special ed. Oh, are you?
I'm not, no, because it makes you.
That's fine. Jill's asking about special ed. Our special ed numbers peaked, I believe, last year and actually have come down a little bit since then. But our special ed co-op assesses the districts within the co-op based on total enrollment because you never know when, one special ed kid with severe needs may budgetarily cost as much as 10 with minor needs. So you can't really budget it based on head count of special ed kids, and they can change on who's on IEP, who moves, and all that. They base it on total enrollment. Our assessment went up 2 years ago. It came down a little bit because our enrollment has plateaued a little bit. So our enrollment, all of those information will come in. But it's basically gone up every year. I mean, it always does. Basic inflation, special ed is expensive. And so the state has also been failing to meet their obligation on the special ed side. Although they increase the amount of dollars going into the general fund, they have subsequently lightened their contributions to special ed, which means we have to transfer more money out of our general to cover special ed. And so I fully expect that to happen again. Again, we'll get our estimates. I'll share them with you as soon as I get them. Weekly notes actually on Friday should have some estimates on that.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none, are there any dissenting votes on 21.5%?
Aye.
Aye.
Steve, Jill,
Jill.
any
Sharice, aye.
votes? Sharice, aye. Any other dissenting votes? Motion passes 4-3. 27.5% will be our LOB moving forward next school year. Okay. 4.5 is our classified salary schedule.
On the classified salary schedule, okay. So on our classified salary schedule, we changed the certified from a percentage to a flat dollar increase on the step and column. And it was suggested shortly thereafter that maybe we should look at that for classified. I have put a sample on here. One is, you can see 1920, that is current. The next one that says 2021 is a sample or potential. And the difference there is it changes from a percent increase across the cells to a flat increase across the cells. This doesn't have to be a recommendation that you just accept as is. It could be something that we review. We could do a committee. We could do anything you want with it. But I wanted to give you a sample of what that looked like. Both the current and the potential start at $10.71 at range 1, level 1. And they go across and down. The current caps out at $23 and something, and the potential caps out at $21.71. It's about $1.70 difference from left to right. But all of the cells from range 10 and lower are actually higher in hourly wage. It's not until you get to ranges like 12 and 13 that it actually starts to come in lower than what the current is. And again, we can start anywhere, we can go anywhere. This indicates a 40-cent raise per range, and the ranges are based on duties, the different tasks, responsibilities of the different positions. And then the raise across going right is 30 cents per year.
I guess I'm a bit confused. When we proposed this, I didn't realize, I thought we were going to stop and freeze where we were, and then moving forward, we're going to just add 40 cents on each range, or 20, or, if we took last year's schedule and the top person made 27 and we added 40 cents, then I thought we were going to have the top person make 27.40. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? How does it change it and lower the end now? I thought we were just going to add to what the schedule was last year. Is that, or what am I missing?
The current schedule is percent. So somebody who is in range 1, year 1, got 25 cents of a raise, and somebody who is in range 17, year 14, got a 45 cent.
No, I apologize. I understand what you're saying. I'm comparing last year's. This is this year's salary if we did percentage, and this year's salary if we did dollar figure, not last year's salary versus this year's salary with a percent change. I apologize.
Yeah, both of them are essentially this year or proposed for next year. And again, this would make it a not a percent raise, but it would be more similar to certified as a flat rate on each of the cells. And then from there, we would just decide if we wanted to add anything more in addition to their step raise, simply by changing range 1, cell 1. Whatever we add would filter through the entire chart.
What's the percentage now?
Percentage now is 2% as you go 1 year over the next.
Questions for Roger?
I assume you have you, well, I should ask, have you gone through our current employees and compared it to this proposed set dollar increase to see where we would stand as far as anybody that would get a significant raise to be in the same range and year, or anybody that would possibly take a decrease? Have you made that comparison?
I compared some cells on this one to cells on the other one, but I did not go individually. What we've done before, if we convert from one salary schedule to another, is that we would hold harmless. And so we would end up going to this chart, finding the cell that is closest to their current amount, slightly more, so that we made sure that they were truly held harmless, and we would place them in a similar cell. So instead of saying, I'm in range 7, year 7, I'm automatically going to be in range 7, year 8 next year, we would look at the cell, make sure that we find the cell probably in range 7 that's closest to their to the salary we want them to have, and it may move them up or down in years.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't move them more than one cell, because it's not dramatically different really until you get to the far bottom right.
I guess I'll just, if I understood correctly, year to year is a 30-cent increase.
Yes.
I'm going to be honest. I think I don't think that's enough.
$624 for a full-time employee pre-tax.
I just don't believe that a 30-cent. I don't think that that's going to keep up with inflation. I don't think that that's going to keep us competitive to a certain degree. And I've said my piece. I mean, I know what we're having to do at work to try to get people, even with COVID and millions of people out of work. They're making more money now sitting at home than working. And I'm 100% on board with the concept. I just, before we approve this, I guess I would question the year-to-year increase.
Steve, what year did we revise this? Do you remember?
I don't recall exactly.
I was hoping that that number was retained at the bottom, but it looks like when it was revised, it was changed. So
it had to be 14, 15.
Yeah. I think it was the last year Rich was here.
okay.
Yes.
And
we're still
right.
Done anything to the base since then?
We did last year, yes.
So we did a percent change.
We added 1%. The chart built in a 2%. We wanted to give 3, so we added 1 to the base, and then that filtered through by raising that range 1, cell 1. And Steve, I understand your point. 30 cents is not something that we necessarily can brag about or know that we're going to be highly competitive. If I just chose a number, the current, if you're in range 1, cell 1, and you go to 2, it's a 21-cent raise.
Yeah.
So 30 was a nice round number that was more than what you got on the top left, but less than what you got on the bottom right. And so I just chose a number in the middle. And we certainly can haggle over what we think is the right number. This was just a way to get us started on what this might look like. And the other thing, again, is we don't have to start at 1071. We could start at 11 in that cell, and everything filters down. And then the 30 cents, if you start better, the 30 cents isn't as bad an issue.
Right. And I agree. I like I said, the concept is perfect with me. I guess I just need a little time to think about maybe assigning some dollar values in there, and your suggestion of maybe just raising the base year 1, range 1. Maybe that's the way to go, and leave it at the 30 cents. We'd have to see what that does to us dollar wise.
Our problem isn't really maintaining. Our problem is more of finding, right? So it's like you're saying the starting range would be a little bit more important than the yearly range.
It would help.
Right?
Yeah.
Because once someone's here, they usually stay.
The other question I would like answered is, what do our normal 10-month employees, like what is their average hourly, weekly hours worked? So do we have 10 months at 40 hours? I mean, what is the total annual for somebody that's on a 10-month contract?
We have, what was it, 1078?
Okay.
For a classified employee that works 9 months, basically full time for the 9 months that school is in session, I think it's 1078 is the number of hours that they get. So something like a teacher's assistant, library aide, somebody like that.
And can you refresh my memory? Do they qualify for unemployment in the summer months?
They do not.
Okay. I knew bus drivers didn't. I couldn't remember if school, classroom school people did or not, or the classified staff. So, okay, 1,078. Thank you.
All right.
So Steve, you're only more on odds of how much we're paying, and really the cent increase helps, but we just need to be paying them more per hour.
Yes, I mean, the 30 cents kind of struck me, but Roger's suggestion of adding to the base and giving everybody an increase that way, I think that calms some of my questions. I don't have an issue at all with the concept. I just, maybe we need to do a little discussion on exactly where we settle starting wage and percent of $1 hourly increase as we go across. And without some sitting down and doing a little math and see where that really puts us, I assume that what Roger has given us keeps us fairly even with what we're paying this year. But we know that that's going to need to go up some for next year. So I would like a chance to think about some options and settle. We need to look at the total cost as much as the 30 cents.
Yeah. So if we're working on that 1,078 as our full-time school year employee at 50 cents a year, it's $539.
Yeah.
From column to column.
How many years do we? Are there very many years where there's not the base is not increased as well as or is it most years the base is not increased?
That's a great question, Justin. We did not add anything to the base for several years after it was created. But that is one thing to consider when you look at this, similar to the teacher's schedule, is that this would be a guaranteed minimum, and that each year we would have the ability to add to the base and therefore manipulate how much the actual is. So whereas the teachers are guaranteed, as long as they're within movement, they're guaranteed the $600 as they move down a step. That's not what we ever expect them to get unless we're in really dire straits and we're not able to add to the base. We come back and we manipulate how much the raise actually is by how much more we can add to the base. And we can do the same here. So 30 cents would be the minimum raise as long as you were able to move across. And then if we decide, no, 50 is what we need or what we can afford, we can just add 20 to the base and make it that. And that way, even somebody at year 15 who is not getting the automatic would get something, which would be a good thing as well.
I think it would be good to do a comparative again. You know, if it's been 6 years since we looked at what average pay for these jobs are across the state, we have all that information at our fingertips from KASB. So if we could look at that from a start or average wage and number of years on the job, those kinds of things, I'd feel better about making a decision.
The only one on this chart that I can tell you on right now is bus drivers.
Bus drivers, yeah.
We are well above the state average on bus drivers, and a lot of that's dependent on the fact that we've got such longevity in our driving fleet that that on average ours is high. Not that necessarily our rates are high, but that our longevity has pushed it high.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions? Do you want some help on that, Roger? Or do
I
you
think it'd be good to get some feedback, yes.
I'll log into KASB and pull those reports. Okay. Moving right along. Summer food program. Roger is proposing that we continue our meal program the way we've been doing it through this COVID response. We have the same access to resources through June 30th. But that we would end that on June 30th unless it were to be extended from the federal government. Are there any questions about that?
What about would we still have the bus drivers work it?
Kim has come to me and discussed this, and this was something that she's been working on. She believes that she has had enough commitment from drivers and cooks that she can continue the program through the month of June. They would be off contract, so we would essentially need to pick up, and they would end up with an hourly for that. Again, there is funding for that, so we're hoping that the program would break even. It's really difficult to tell. That all depends on food costs and numbers served and things like that. But at this point, we believe we can sustain the program as long as the program is funded through June 30th. And we will have a board meeting early in June. And if they extend it, hopefully we'll know by then and be able to reevaluate even July.
I appreciate this recommendation. I'm in full support of continuing it.
It's been wildly successful.
Do we need to make a motion?
Yes, because we are extending the hours for the cooks and the drivers. So I would appreciate a motion to continue the program.
I move we continue the program through June 30th and that we extend the workers and the cooks pay to reflect the hours that they service in this capacity.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Okay, if there's none, are there any dissenting votes? I'm not seeing any head nods and I'm not hearing any no's. So motion passes 7-0. I think also I just learned the Asaria Summer Youth Program has decided to cancel. That was noticed over the weekend, I think. I don't know if Gypsum's made their decision yet or not.
Yeah, I'm trying to get on. Sorry. Okay, yeah, we are not going this summer except for community work. So if we can get a group of kids together for one day during the week, then we will volunteer to help them around the city of Gypsum to do community work. And we're going to do board games and some other games for their homes. But other than that, there will be no summer youth program.
Okay. Well, this will be a good way, at least, that people can be seen and touched like we have through this last 2 months. So thanks for that update, Jill. The reason that connected in my brain is because Carolyn Bixby had asked if we weren't doing a school lunch program, if the Asaria Summer Youth Program got up. Okay. 4.7 capital projects.
So there's 3 bids on here in particular. The facilities committee was scheduled to meet last week, but we had some issues pop up and we weren't able to meet. So we'll need to reschedule that fairly soon. Bond projects, capital projects, work being done. I posted on Twitter today, they've torn out the sidewalk in front of the north doors. So the north doors are now blocked. I expect that they will be pouring back concrete shortly. They've been moving rather quickly, and hopefully that it's looking great and ahead of schedule, which is nice. So there's certain other things that are continuing to be ongoing, and unfortunately, we're having some trouble securing help within the building. Getting bids on certain projects. We're close to having a recommendation for the walls, a few new walls that were going to go up. And some of we need those things done so people can start moving into their classrooms, because that starts a domino effect as people move around. Certain things in here we'd like to move forward with so that we can make sure we get these things done in time for school to start and take advantage of our best buying power. The first one is a locker bid from Pure Workplace Solutions. This was on the recommended list from the facilities committee. At that point, I had up to $70,000. This bid is basically $30,000, so we're in really good shape here. These lockers are a gray with purple doors, and they are the base size for the football lockers are essentially the same as they currently are, but the PE lockers are significantly larger than what the PE ones currently are. And this, I think, would put us in pretty good shape, and it came in under budget. So I am recommending that we go with this. And we need to get this ordered because as it is now, they're projecting late July for delivery, and we really need to make sure that we get these in place before school starts.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on the lockers?
Do we need to vote
separate
on
motions?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me, but if there is challenges to anything, it may be best to break them out. I'm not sure And we can do that later too. If there are no questions on the lockers, the next one is the Red Cat system. This was something that the technology committee discussed. These are teacher speakers. We currently have one in the third grade setup. You clip a little microphone to your collar or your tie, and there's a speaker in the back, and the teacher doesn't have to strain themselves with projecting to the entire class. This is one of those technology systems that has been studied and proven to increase student engagement and actually produce productivity within the classroom, as the students can hear throughout the entire room, and the teachers have are actually reporting that less fatigue because they're not having to project the entire time.
So is this every classroom then? Was that the decision?
This is most classrooms.
Okay.
This will cover almost every classroom. I forget how many we're looking at. It's pretty universal.
I knew it was a large amount, but I couldn't remember what.
You're looking at pretty much every teacher. Andy was researching this. He was able to get, because of the bulk purchase, a discount. The discount is only good for so long. And so we are looking at, actually it may say in the quote, I assume it says how many. Great. Well, that says lockers.
I know, that's what I was in too.
Oh, that was the competitive bid. I'm sorry, I don't have the Red Cat in front of me. But there is a discount there of about $11,000 that I believe expires before our next board meeting. Plus, we also, again, want to make sure we order them in plenty of time to have them in the classroom ready to go and set up by the time school starts. So,
And this is part of the bond allocation, right?
yes.
Okay.
The tech committee met and discussed what would make the best impacts within the classroom. This is the same committee that chose the TVs in the classroom last year and have met throughout the course of this year. And Andy was given a budget, and this fits within that budget. And we still have, we've met pretty much everybody's requests for classroom technology within that. And it all comes from that allocated amount from the bond issue.
Okay.
Within that budget.
So this money is being spent out of bond money that we approved, and excuse me, how much, what will be remaining from the bond if we spend this money for that IT line item?
This money won't take half of what is left in there. There are a lot of other requests, and even with all those other requests, it is short of the total budget. I can't tell you by how much. It's $10,000 or more.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's not like we're spending every single penny at this point. And part of that also comes back to, we have until June of next summer to expend the last of the bond money. So this will be stuff that we spend now, get in the classroom, and there will still be some money left over that will allow us to potentially make purchases during the school year next year, or at the end of the year, the summer purchases next year.
And how much, I remember 3, 4, 5 years ago, we had one of these brought to a board meeting. But I don't know if I ever really heard how many teachers would actually use it or how much real support there was for it. But I assume that the tech committee I assume they have some teachers on that committee. I'm not for sure who all is on it. And I'm not against spending it. It's money that we agreed to. Well, when we agreed to our bond, we allocated so many dollars to IT, and we were going to allow an IT committee to decide how to best spend that. I guess my only question is if only 50% of the teachers are going to use it, is it worth the $50,000? And I guess my second thing is kind of goes towards negotiations. I guess my question is if we're going to provide equipment that makes each teacher's life in the classroom easier, better, and less stressful, is it fair to associate some of those dollars when we go to negotiations?
I certainly wouldn't on a one-to-one basis, but it is, again, we're providing a a working environment. And so whatever we can do to make the working environment good for the educators will increase job satisfaction, and it will help everybody, students, teachers, and everybody alike. And there are a number of teachers that, it got to a point where there was a number of requests for this, and we started looking at it, and there are some people who don't know that they want this. And when we get it into their classroom and we get it on them, they'll see the impact that it makes, because they may not be aware of the impact it could have. And so for those who didn't specifically say, hey, yeah, I'd really like that, we are thinking that once provided, they will see the benefit, and that benefit will, the students will much appreciate it as well.
Bill, you
How many
committee, right?
how many teachers have demoed this, and kind of getting to that, what you just alluded to. So the proposal is to provide this to all teachers, whether they are interested in it or not.
Yes, this would make it universal.
And how many teachers have actually demoed this in the classroom? I heard you say third grade.
Third grade's had it for years.
Yeah, I thought, did Lori ask me a question?
Third grade has had it for years, and we've had it. It has been borrowed a number of times. I've borrowed it myself during professional development in service. I've borrowed it myself. It's some of it depends on the size of the room or the activities that are being conducted within that room. And again, a big piece of that is not having to project all day long. I can certainly give anecdotal information based on my own experience. That first week of school, you're always hoarse because you haven't been using your teacher voice all summer long. And then, of course, your first week of practices, you're using your coaching voice, and you're hoarse by the time it's done and have a sore throat because you haven't been using that voice either. And this will reduce a lot of that fatigue going on. But also, that kid who sits in the back corner and can hear some of what you're saying, but really doesn't care what you're saying, is going to have a teacher voice in the back of their head as the speaker is right there, and they're not going to be able to help but hear what you're saying, because you're going to be right in their face with this amplified voice.
Are there any other questions?
If a teacher, we're not making any expectations. I mean, if we provide this and they just choose not to use it, that we're not making any expectations that they use something that they're not interested in, right?
We would hope that they would use it, but I'm not to the point that I would necessarily require that they use it. Again, the thought there is if they try it this is one of those benefits that once they try it, we feel like they're going to like it. And I think the benefits will be obvious to them.
Wasn't our other thought when they move rooms, then it's already there? Like it doesn't go with the teachers with the room. So if Mrs. Pearson wants to move again, it's going to be in that next room.
We'll certainly have universal coverage on that. So it'll certainly be something that they'll be able to use all day long.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I had some questions about this one. But now knowing that it's part of our bond and being recommended by the IT committee, I want my opinion as a facilities member, committee member, to be of value, and I don't want to undercut the IT committee. So I think I'm on board with it. I hope that there's a way that we can encourage, make it part of Domain 7. I mean, if we're going to spend the money, I hope that it gets used. I can understand that you can't go around and knock on everybody's door every 15 minutes and make sure that they're using it. But I hope that we can find a way to get the benefit out of it, since we are asking for better test scores and better results in the classroom. I think we need to drive our point that direction. And if it only helps a small percentage of the kids, it's probably worth it.
Okay. Any other questions on that? If not, we'll move on to the bus quote. We didn't want to make the decision last month. We were all, I think, a little worried about the resources, but we do have a grant that will greatly reduce the cost of purchasing a bus, even though it wasn't necessarily on our schedule for this year. Is there any new information about the bus that we need to know?
Nothing's really changed on the situation. The grant does expire, though, before our next board meeting. We have secured disposal, which is part of the grant, is disposal of the old bus. And this bus was scheduled to be replaced soon anyway. And so we've been pleased with the gas bus that we purchased. This old diesel will be replaced by a new gas, and we feel like we're moving in the right direction. Gas prices are down, and then of course all of the hassle with the DEF and trying to keep the diesels going has just been difficult, and I think this moves us in the right direction. And so basically what we're doing is we're taking some of the purchases that we were going to make on this year's budget, and we're going to push it to next year's budget and move this one into this year's budget, because we now have room. This grant has allowed us to do that. If we don't purchase this now, we lose that money, and I believe that it's well worth it, and I do recommend that we go forward with it.
Well, I had a question on this one too. So I guess I must have misunderstood or not paid good enough attention at our last meeting. I thought that this grant ran through, excuse me, late this summer. I'm not sure why I had that in my head. I kind of took it from the last meeting that this would be a decision that we would make maybe later this summer, after this COVID thing is hopefully behind us and we have a better idea of where we stand. And I apologize if I just misunderstood that, but I didn't think that this grant expired this quick.
Yeah, just the letter states that it expires 90 days from the date of the selection. So that was March 16th. So we
Okay.
June 16th to order the bus.
So this has a nose.
This is exactly like the gas one, so it will have a nose. It does have the arm, but what we found is the new ones have the nose slopes so dramatically that in most cases, the visuals are really pretty good. And the other thing, again, that we're up against with this is delivery time. And if we want to have this for the first day of school, we have to make sure we get our name on the list and give them time to produce it, because we're not buying one off the lot. They will have to make it to our specs the way we've asked for it.
On the specs, it says car seats in the bus. Can somebody explain, Matt, what that looks like? 'Cause I must have missed that on last month's.
The first couple rows have integrated fold down car seats. And if you put a car seat in a bus, the regular ones you'd buy at Walmart, and you strap it to that car seat, to that seat, and that seat is not designed to have that. James, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe by regulation, you're not allowed to put somebody in the seat behind that seat. And so by putting a car seat in, say, the front row, you're actually occupying the first two rows of that bus. There are some kindergarten and special ed kids that are small enough that they really should be in car seats. There are times in which a child might be fidgety or unable to sit still, that putting them in a seatbelt helps for bus discipline. And of course, we've had different discussions about whether or not we want to transport younger kids. And if we do that, we need to have a way of accommodating that. But they also fold up into the seat. So if you don't need them, that you don't even hardly know they're there. They don't impact the capacity of that seat.
So how much does it cost for these car seats, Roger?
It was a couple $100 extra. Do you have that number? I don't know what that number is.
I couldn't find it in the spec sheet.
I mean, you've given some reasons, but I mean, it almost looks like the real reason is if you want to start a preschool in August, you need a bus.
Well, you had also talked about the possibility of transporting them to existing preschools. And again,
True, touche. But we're finding out about it on the spec. I'd like to know it a little sooner. It kind of looks like maybe it was hidden a little bit.
Well, it does add a little bit to the cost of those seats, but it also is something that is allows it to be usable. Once you have those, you're not really allowed to go in there, pull out the other seat, and replace that seat. The bus needs to be operated as it was initially spec'd. So coming in and retrofitting makes it very, very difficult. And this would just be a way of hedging the future if we ever head in that direction of transporting. And again, there are times in which we have kindergartners that are small enough that we really should or could use this now.
I don't know why I can't see it.
James, do you have the ability to figure out what that adds to the cost?
I do not have the spec sheet in front of me. It should be in the paperwork that Mr. Stump has. If not, I can get it tomorrow when I get in the office.
Yeah, the only thing I'm seeing is like a cup holder, which is well worth it. Clipboard holder.
Yeah, I don't see it.
And then a doghouse.
I know there are two separate little groups on the spec sheet. One is for the engine, and then the other one is for the chassis and the inside. The car seats, if I remember right, should be on the chassis, the thicker of the two specs.
I don't see it, but
And James, how does that work if we have We don't have any buses that have this option currently, correct?
And that is correct. We have just temporary seats that we can bring in there and strap to the seat.
So how does that work when a kindergartner per se that's smaller comes in and needs to be in one of those seats? Is it the driver's responsibility to fold that down and hitch them in there? Does the kindergarten do them? Is there a typical protocol on how that works?
It does pertain to the driver, making sure that they are seatbelted in. But most kids are smart enough that if you show them a couple different times, all the driver has to do is just verify that they're buckled in, and it's good for there.
So am I hearing that eventually you'd like to have, even if we didn't have a preschool, you'd like to have this in every bus?
I think I'm not planning on buying a bus next year, so it'll take a while to cycle that through, but that very well could be a continuing thing that we do. And part of it will also come down to, we may decide we hate them. And if we decide we hate them as far as their usability, I've had these before. In my previous district, we did these as well. And we were happy with them, but I thought we could try them in this.
Would we get into a situation if we have them in one bus and we don't provide them in all buses? Are we going to do we set a precedence or a liability?
Good question.
Or adding on to that, if they're in there and a child is not properly strapped. I mean, as a parent of young kids, I know how hard it is to strap those kids into those car seats. And if they're in there as an option and they're not properly strapped in there when they maybe should have been, is that a liability as well?
Well, we're already doing it in Doug's bus, right?
Yeah, we're already doing it in the special ed bus.
I mean, there's actually two angles I'd be looking at is I know we said that it's hard to put them into another bus, but if you were putting them in one, it almost seemed that you ought to do that in all of them or none of them. And that may be terrible logic. Because we need to try to keep kids safe. And if there is truly a need in our current situation, then I'm curious why we didn't do it before.
Cassie says we do have a kindergarten student right now that has an IEP that he needs to be in a car seat or seat belted. So with that student right now, are we transporting, is that Doug's bus that you're referring to, or do we do that in a separate vehicle?
We do have two buses that do have seatbelts already in it. And it depends. I don't know what the kid's name is, so I can't tell you what route he's on.
Okay.
So is it safe to say that our exposure right now is one or two kids sporadically?
Yeah. Okay. Are there other questions about the bus?
Yeah, I'm going to tune in. Okay, so, and then Roger, this is probably more for you, but I don't know if this matters, but I think I'm on page 3. And although we did check the gasoline engine for the engine, when you go down a little bit below that and it says fuel tank, it says diesel. And then it says increase diesel tank to 100 gallon, and we checked that. So I don't know if we need to make sure that says gas. I don't know.
I will make sure that it is switched to the right one once we get permission.
Okay. Thank you.
It won't affect the price that much at all.
Okay, what is the will of the board?
I think we should handle them as separate motions.
Okay. So the first item of consideration are the lockers.
I don't have the What was the total dollar value of the lockers? 25.
29,865 and 64 cents.
I move we approve the locker purchase from, what's it called? Pure,
Workplace Solutions.
Workplace Solutions. As quoted, 29,000, whatever it was.
Okay.
29,835 and 64 cents.
Dwight, second.
Is there any discussion? If not, are there any dissenting votes? Hearing and seeing none, motion passes 7-0. Okay, the next one is for the Red Cat amplification system. And the amount is $49,665.
I move that we accept the bid amount of $49,665. Dwight?
Second. Steve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any, is there any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none. Are there any dissenting votes? Hearing and seeing none, motion passes 7-0. And then lastly, the bus quote, which with the $20,000 grant makes the total $66,275 from Kansas Truck Equipment.
What was our plan for school bus replacement this year, Roger? Were we planning to buy a bus this year?
I believe we had a small bus that was on the list for this year that we're going to be doing next year.
We've flip-flopped 2 buses. Okay.
At the current time, we really don't have to replace a bus. Is that correct?
It was scheduled to get replaced next year. It is, I mean, it's rough. It's showing its age. If not this year, it was scheduled to go next year anyway. And this is the bus that qualified for the grant.
Is there a motion? If there is no motion, then the purchase will not be made.
I will make a motion to purchase the bus from Kansas Truck Equipment for $66,275.
Is there a second?
Second, I'd like to save the $20,000. I'm not sure it's worth kicking the can down the road. But I hope we have school.
Any further discussion? If not, we do have a motion on the table to purchase the bus from Kansas Truck Equipment for $66,275, and that's a 71 passenger gasoline. Are there any dissenting votes?
Nay.
Nay.
That's Jimmy. Dwight? Okay, any other dissenting votes? Right now I have 2. If not, the motion passes 5-2. Okay. The next item on the agenda are Board of Ed communications.
Well, I apologize for signing on late. I was logged in at 6:15 and my screen kept saying waiting for the host. So I finally at 6:34 decided maybe I better check. And so I apologize for signing on late. It was a technical problem, but more with me than the computer, I'm afraid.
No problem. I just want to convey how fun it's been to see our staff at those lunch breaks here in this area. Every day that my kids go over, they come home with some great story, and it's just been a fun way to connect with the Southeast School. And also to thank Mr. Stump for allowing them to serve as a Booster Club delivery service for some of our Booster Club items, to get items across the district. That was a nice way to do that without having to pay shipping. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move on to the Superintendent's Report.
Okay, so this last week, I held a Zoom meeting with the senior class, and we discussed some of the options that were available to us for graduation. Now, I've included that to you, what we discussed about. We went through the options, fully acknowledging that none of them are great, but some of them are significantly better than others. The hope is that we can have a full graduation in a traditional setting that is no different than it was last year or any year prior to that. That will all depend on what the restrictions will be in place on the date in which we've chosen. So the seniors were given a couple of options as we went through and asked to kind of rate their choices on this. And I'd like to be able to put this out as a final decision. The date that was most popular out of the options was the Friday night, July 17th at 7:30 in the evening. That is the weekend in which prom has been rescheduled. So that makes that a pretty big weekend, and more likely that everybody will block themselves out that weekend and be sure to be here for that. So that'll be a nice chance to get together and have a hopefully full traditional graduation. We will still provide live streaming because there will still be people who will need to be distancing themselves. Either they are high risk or not feeling well. The second option that is listed here would be to restrict the graduation to a limited number within the gym. If you look at the graduated plan, the phases that is produced by the governor, the first phase was 10 or less. The second phase was 30 or less. We have 53 graduates. That doesn't help. The third phase is 90 or less. Again, we have 53 graduates, so that doesn't help. And then there is some indication, the numbers progress. So the second one would be giving each senior 2 tickets. That would keep our number below 200. The third one would be we do just the seniors, no audience, but we live stream it. That at least gives the seniors that presence of they're with their classmates, they're in a group, they're in the gym, they walk across, and we get to do everything except you're not going to hear the cheers from the audience, but the audience will be able to participate through live stream. And that would limit us to less than 60. Each of these are progressively worse options, and we hope we don't get to B, C, or D, because that when we get to July 17th, if everything goes according to the phase plan, we will have no restrictions, no travel restrictions, and no size limit restrictions. Schedule D was not very popular. And at some point we get to where we just mail the diplomas home because at that point we've run out of reasonable options and we just need to get everybody their certificate. So I provided you with basically the outline and with the seniors' responses to that survey. I also provided you with the governor's letter explaining what the restrictions are currently and how we're hoping to move forward. So July 17th is the direction that we're going to go. At some point, it's just not worth it when you get into the worst, so we'll just mail them home. We had 50-50 by the graduation by appointment, so I'm going to cancel option D. And so we'll end up with A, B, C, and E. And again, hopefully we can have A and everything moves forward. But my intention will be to type this up and send it out to everybody, what our plan is through our messenger service tomorrow, with all of those details on it. And again, I've already met with the seniors, so they are aware of what the intentions there are and where we're looking at. There's been some conversations about 8th grade promotion, 7th and 8th grade honors. And at this point, most of the discussions have been about gathering up the certificates and either mailing them home or possibly handing them out in August. There is still some consideration we might have a drive-up option, but I'm leaving that up to the building administrators to decide on that, and that decision will have to be made this week. My assumption is that we will either mail them out or hold them until August, unless we know somebody's not coming back to us on that. That's all I have on my notes.
If there is a class interested in having a dance that's out on, like in the junior high, is that something that they should be communicating with their class sponsors about, or what could I encourage kids that are asking these kinds of questions?
I'm not really supportive of having a junior high dance outside of the school year at this point. We've made special accommodations for prom. That is not, that's not a normal school dance. There will be a lot of school dances next year, and hopefully we get to have them all. So that is not really something I've been planning.
Okay. Any questions for Superintendent?
Not a question for Roger, but for you, Lori, on graduation as a parent of a senior. Obviously we want to have it normal, but what would be your best next option? Have tickets for the parents at least, or what's your thoughts? I'd like to know your seniors' parents' thoughts.
I like the options as they're laid out, that we have 2 tickets per student and the student can choose who gets those tickets. You know, we're not saying that it has to be a parent that uses them, and they're going to have different family circumstances. And but I'm thrilled that we're doing something live and that we haven't just defaulted and said we're going to take a safe stance and just say, no, we're not going to do anything. And I like that we're 2 months out and we can get a date out to people so they can plan their lives, and that they know know ahead of time what those 4 steps are, so that they know the decisions that we've been made. So I feel really good about it. But how about you, Sharice?
Well, and even beyond that, worst case, if it's only the seniors that can get together, I think that's great to give them a chance to see each other, be there physically with each other. Then they can go home and be with their family. And I think even that is an okay option if A and B doesn't work. So
yeah, I agree. If you weren't a part of the community parade yesterday, that was a huge boost at our house with Madeline. She just could not get over how much our community came out and how much support there was for those kids, and how fun it was to socially distance and just physically put your eyes on friends that you haven't seen in 2 months. So
we saw your video where you didn't social distance at your house.
I did not social distance at my house, but we were less than 10 people when we started.
Yeah, when you started, maybe.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Stump?
Roger, I assume you're going to want the video projector for both A and B.
Yes, we would want the video projector if we can get it. Yes, the big, and we're again trying to do this as normally as possible for even the position where we lock it down. If the guest speaker is not comfortable coming, we will videotape and play it essentially live there in the group so that everybody gets a chance to experience guest speakers and all of that.
Okay. I may also, we'll see how the timing jets out because I've got a big conference the next week, but we're actually getting some other equipment that actually enhances this type of situation because we're doing a big virtual meeting with the switcher and those type of things. So I may be able to actually enhance this.
Great.
Cool. Anything else? Okay, principals, do you have anything to add to the written reports you provided us?
The only thing I have to add to that is we will not be having kindergarten graduation and foresee not bringing it back. And this would be the time to do it smoothly. That's all I have.
I have nothing extra to add.
And as for the high school, there has been some talk and some recommendations from a few people on the 8th grade promotion that we also phase it out. I don't know that that's what everybody wants to do, but there's been some talk about doing kind of a virtual reading names and having teachers kind of gather together maybe and just kind of do a little video of the recognition of what they've done and post that on the internet, and then maybe even have them drive up and hand them their certificates or something. But that we've been talking about and kind of still tossing around. We'll try to finalize that in the next few days. But then also for the high school recognition, for different certificates and awards, we're also trying to come up with something like that too.
Has the 8th grade promotion night and the kindergarten graduated night become not attended? Do people not want to do it?
As far as I know, attendance-wise, last year was really, really high for the 8th grade graduation or promotion. So I don't know. Just some folks have mentioned to me that they'd like to see it just phased out. Others, though, are in strong support of it.
Who are those folks? Is that staff or is that parents?
Some of both, but not as many as who are in support of keeping it.
Kathy, do you have any comments on kindergarten graduation? Why?
Well, I think a lot of it is they're staying in the same building. They're going to 1st grade. We don't have 1st grade graduation. We don't have 2nd grade graduation. Your 6th graders are actually the only ones who are changing buildings. They're changing the building number. They're staying in the same brick and mortar, but they're the only ones that are really changing a building number, if that makes sense.
I'd be okay with the kindergarten, but I think with our junior high, any of our kids, anytime we can recognize their efforts and be together as a community, I think there's great benefit to that. We don't have that many chances to celebrate what our kids do in a community setting, I don't think. So just my 2 cents worth is I would be opposed to 8th grade promotion going away.
I guess I'm more what Lori is saying. I'm probably more in tune with that. I don't like either one because I think sometimes traditions, although are pain for some of us that have to do them and put them on, mean a lot in those kids' lives as they move forward. And something like eighth grade or even kindergarten, it is something that says we're going on to high school. Or I think there's more value in some of that for a lot of kids than what we give it credit
And it doesn't have to look the same. I mean, there's lots of different ways we can recognize kids for what they've done. But I think there's great value in that. I'd like to see our Trojan Choice Award become a big deal and our National Honor Society inductions become a big dang deal, because right now they're just the parents and the kids who are being honored are the only ones that know that. So I guess I would just challenge us to be creative in how we can think about how we recognize our kids and celebrate with them.
Lori, I definitely agree with you, because after the parade yesterday, I mentioned to my husband how some teachers have said to me, like, thank you for being a Trojan forever, because we don't have a town. We are just here. And so you do lose a lot of the community support. And, if it wasn't for me, then my husband or my son, neither one would know even about this parade or the graduation. And even my son watched the whole thing. So I think, to me, I'm like, oh, we should have a parade every year, because it gets the community involved, because no one wants to come to the school to a graduation. So, yeah. And I love kindergarten graduation. And especially like with Mrs. Wolf with her first year, it just showed to me like how excited she was to be involved with those little kindergartners, because they did a great job. So, yeah, I just, like you said, it doesn't have to look the same, but we need to keep the kids out there in front of our patrons so our patrons know what's going on and we continue to get their support.
All right. Any other questions on principal reports? All right. Do we need them for any of our executive session discussions? Maybe 6.1.
.1 could involve Cassie. I don't believe it will take long. And then after that, I don't know. Only if you have questions for Wayne on the upcoming coaches hirings, will he need to be? Otherwise, no.
But we don't have any of those recommendations right now.
They are in the. There's a spreadsheet in the recommendations.
Not personnel. Sorry.
It's not in personnel. No. It's under the recommendation.
I see it now. Yeah. Does anybody need Wayne to stay?
No.
Okay. All right. So we need a motion to go into executive session for student matters for 5 minutes.
I would hope that'd be enough with Cassie.
With Cassie, yep. And you?
Please.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Steve, I'll second the motion. Any dissenting votes? Seeing none, 7-0. We'll see you back here at 9:10. 9:15. It is 9:10.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
What's your new address? Okay.
Yes, at this point.
Is the board good moving on? Do we need more time?
I'm good.
I'm fine.
Good? Okay. Thank you, Cassie.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Cassie.
Yep. See you
Bye.
soon.
Is there a motion? Oh, that's later. Never mind. Personnel. Do we need to go into session for these? Anyone?
I know.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Steve makes a motion on 6.2 for how long?
I don't know, 5-10 minutes. Let's say 10.
Okay.
I'll second.
Therese, I heard you first. Is there any discussion? Any dissenting votes? If not, we will go into executive session for personnel matters and return at 9:28.
And it looks like we've got everybody back.
Okay, great. We now need to go into executive session to discuss negotiations. How long do we want with Mr. Stump?
I would assume 15 minutes as a minimum.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Steve, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Justin. Any discussion? Any opposition? Seeing and hearing none, we will go into executive session till 9:45 for negotiations. until after the June meeting? Is that what I'm hearing from everyone?
We've got to get more information.
But we can do the rest. We could go ahead and schedule and hear proposals prior to that.
We could. We are back in session.
Yeah.
Move that we go another, go to 9:55
Okay.
for purpose of negotiations.
Okay. I second that motion. Any consent? Seeing none, motion passes 7-0 for negotiations till 9:55.
Okay, and we are back.
Okay. If everyone's ready, next on the agenda are recommendations for hire and resignations.
Unless I would recommend you just do one motion for all the recommended hires and then a second motion for all the resignations on here, but you can read them individually if you so choose. The spreadsheet for coaching assignments does include, if you open that document, it does include some recommendations for hire that aren't listed separately. Our new hire, Patrick Schroeder, is recommended for assistant cross country and assistant junior high basketball. Our new hire, Dylan Goodall, is recommended for junior high basketball. I guess those are the only three that are not listed in the other as separate motions, but the others are rehires in that spreadsheet.
Okay.
I move we approve the hires as listed on the spreadsheet.
And that's Dwight.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Is there a second?
Therese, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, are there any dissenting votes? Seeing and hearing none, the motion passes 7-0. Okay, next on the agenda are the out-of-district kindergarten applications.
We have resignations to approve.
Oh, resignations. Sorry, that was just hires. Is there a
I
motion?
move we approve the resignations as presented.
Therese, second.
Any discussion? If not, any dissenting votes? Seeing and hearing none, motion carries 7-0. Now, out-of-district kindergarten applications.
I move we approve the, what was there, 4 or 5 out of district kindergarten applications as listed.
I move we postpone it until June to see if we get how many more, and to see how many roundup kids we get at the roundup. Make sure we don't get our class sizes too big.
So we have a motion on the table. There's not been a second. So if there's no second, the motion will die.
Second, Therese.
Okay, continued discussion?
Which motion are we seconding and considering?
Your motion, yeah, Sharice, which motion were you seconding? I guess we should.
I seconded the motion to approve those listed right now.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Any further discussion on that motion?
Have we been, the past couple of years, have we been, sorry, I can't remember, approving a list of them before the June 1st deadline?
Last couple of years, we have been, again, especially with kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of remember the reason that you guys like to do it was just because the families would enroll somewhere else and you're afraid you missed out on somebody. Is that correct?
They tend to get a little antsy on us, and it really allows us to move forward.
But it also puts us in a precarious position, like what Jimmy said, that then if we have 6 people in district, then we have to scramble and we have too many kids for the class space.
Doesn't one know all the in district? I guess the one that's in.
What did you say, Jill? Do you have something to add?
Yeah, Jill asked if Linnell knows, and if we don't have a good accounting for that, but she also recognizes that people do move and
Sure.
change our number.
Yep.
Sure. I was maybe clarifying a little bit for Jim since he hadn't been involved with that before.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the 5 recommendations for out-of-district kindergarten, are there any dissenting votes?
Nay. Jimmy.
Nay. Okay.
Justin.
Nay, Dwight.
I hear 3 dissenting votes. Anyone else? Okay, motion passes 4-3. Okay. That is all. If there are no dissenting votes, is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move, Madam President.
Thank you. I second that motion. All those in favor? Or all those that don't oppose, I guess leave the meeting. Thank you all.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody stay safe.
Roger, what's your current address?
My current address is